Hey guys, welcome to another episode. Today we are covering the topic of valve shims. We are upgrading from our stock camshaft to the Vic Auto Street Performance cams. So they're solid billet and they require a different kind of shim thickness. Now we're going from stock shims and a stock camshaft to an aftermarket camshaft for a little bit more performance. So we need to be able to measure and install the correct shims. And we have a complete shim kit, which is also available from Vic Auto. And I'll make sure to put a link in the bottom of the description there for you where to find yours. And we're going to how to measure them, and we're going to take a look at what we have now, get them all measured up, and see if we can find the right ones for our fit, and then get them in within spec. We're looking to get between 0.017 to 0.019 is what is considered spec for these. So let's start by taking a look at what we have now, and then where we need to go to. So what we're going to be doing first is we've already installed our new camshaft. This is a solid billet one. I'll make sure to put a link in the description down below for this one to get yours. But we already have it installed. We have to remove the tower, slide in the camshaft, and install it back down. These are 13mm bolts that are in here on the outside and on the inside that help hold that down. And so what we're going to be doing is measuring with a feeler gauge the gap on the bottom here. And this is at the very largest size, which is a 0.88mm or a 0.035 for standard. And that is way too much. So that's a pretty big gap there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and measure all these to make sure they're relatively the same. But one cool trick you can do to save your valves, because remember we just did our valve lapping to get those valves nice and seated correctly, is actually take your head bolts, turn them upside down and go from the bottom, and that will create a clearance for your valves to open and close freely without any resistance. You do them in the front and in the back, just like that. Got two back here, two here, and as we rotate the camshaft, we will be able to check our clearances just fine. So what I'm doing is making sure that the top of the cam is facing completely away from the valve, so it's completely closed. And again, massive gap. I mean, massive gap. Yeah, pretty big all the way around. I have a feeling number 4 is going to be the same way. Bring it all the way around. Yeah, really big gaps all the way around. So what we're going to want to do is get this cam tower off and get these buckets out. So let's zip off these bolts and take a look. So now that we've got the buckets out, we can actually remove the tower out of our way completely and take a look at these buckets on their own. Now what's really important to notice is that these tabs are front and back, as in facing the middle of the engine and the intake. Middle of the engine intake. This is important because there's actually a valve tool that goes over and above and puts pressure on the outer sides of this, so you can actually change these shims in and out if you have that tool. It does make the job quite easier and definitely kind of worth it, but we're going to do it the old school way here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the shims out. If you take just a small pick like this, get to the access panel here on the side and slowly work it. Go back and forth, You should be able to get it out just like that. Set this to the side. And we're going to grab a digital caliper. Make sure we are at 0. Come on now, play nice. And we're going to measure the thickness of these shims. So this one says 4.17. And we're going to go to the next one. So we can see that there's actually quite a difference all the way from 4.3 millimeters all the way up to a 4.0, which was here on cylinder number 2. So this goes to show that there are minute differences between each shim, which is why it's so important for you to actually break these out individually and measure these, unless you have that valve tool and you can pop them out while it's all reassembled. But in our case, it's so important to measure these, because when it comes time to reinstall new valve shims, we'll make sure we have the right ones that are within our tolerance. Alright, so I've got everything here on the board for us, but the first thing we're going to want to do is cover our camshafts. So this is our exhaust camshaft. We can tell because it has the gear drive on it for our distributor. This is our stock one. And this is our new billet street performance ones from Vic Auto. I'll make sure to put those in the description down below for these. But the base circle on these is smaller than this one. So we have to make up that gap for this machining difference in the material. You can see the cast iron's thicker, this one's a little skinnier, and we have to make up for those minute differences. So in order to do that, we measured, just a second ago, we measured our stock shims, and these are the numbers we got, roughly, okay, with our digital caliper. Now we have to add caps, and these are called lash caps. They're little tiny caps that go on top of the valve, and where our spring is, they just sit right on top. And they've got a little indentation here. I'll show you a little bit picture. So that's the little indentation rests on top of the valve, and the top side of it is flat to match up with the bucket underneath it. So we need to make sure to use those. These come in as a standard 1.5 millimeter. So that's what I've accounted for here. And we subtracted that from our stock shim thickness, and this is what we came up with on the bottom here, cylinder 1 through 4. And our ideal lash setting is 0.018. That's right in the middle of our 017 and our 019. So ideally that's where we want to be. So what I did is I went to Vic Auto and I got a shim kit. This has every size in between we're going to need, all the way from a 3.1 all the way up to a 5.1, and everything in between in 0.05 increments. And so it comes in a nice box just like this one, all nice and clean and organized. So what I did is I was able to go one at a time and start fitting them. And so I would try one size. If that wasn't quite the right lash setting, I would go down to the next size. Or if it was too big, I'd go up a size. It's kind of one of those checks and balances systems. Now it does take more time, but it is a little bit more thorough and exact. There's not really a science to it. I know there's different methods of how to measure this, and with different programs and things like that to really help you do that. But just for something like in a small garage setting like this, that's really just kind of what we had to do. And having this kit makes it so much easier, because as we saw when we first measured, the differences between them are so great. So when I finally got down looking for an ideal lash, these are the shims that we came up with. Is cylinder 1 needed a 4 exact, number 2 needed a 3.9, number 3 needed a 3.65, and number 4 needed a 3.8. So I took a measurement of the difference here, and the difference on number 1 and 2 are almost the same, 0.15. We subtracted from our initial to our ending one was a 0.15, and 0.47 and 0.55 on number 3 and number 4. Now that's a huge jump in size. Now this also accounts for the machining of the caps. They may not be super exact. Our camshafts, you know, they're machined a little differently, and the actual shim themselves, and these shims, these little discs, can be machined in slight variances. Even though they stamp something on the bottom, there could be slight differences in there. So those are some things we had to make up for. But just to give you guys a visual of what a 0.5 mil looks like, I actually put it here on my caliper. And you guys can probably barely see the gap there. You can barely see the white in there. That's the thickness of 0.5 millimeter. So it's so minute that it seems big when we do the math, but in physical reality, it's not a huge gap, but this can make all the difference. So we're going to go to the bench here, and we're going to check our lash one more time to make sure that we are within spec at the 0.017 to the 0.019. And if we are, then we're going to move to the exhaust side, and we're going to do the exact same process. Hey guys, we're going to take a quick break to talk about today's video sponsor. Man, there's just so many parts. I just don't know where to start. Should I start on the bottom with my suspension? Should I start with my engine? I mean, I don't know where to start. You know what? I'm just gonna call them. They'll know what to do. All right, the number's right here on the bottom. Let's give them a call.
Vic Auto.
Hey Matt, it's Marshall.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Hey, you know what? I'm starting a new project and I really just don't know where to start. Is there somewhere you could guide me to probably where I should start my build?
Well, I can certainly help with that. Where are we at right now exactly?
Well, let me tell you about it. And just like that, it's so easy to get expert tech advice on your build. All you have to do is give them a call, tell them what you're working with, and they can help you. All you have to do is visit vicauto.com, check out all their awesome parts and specials. They even have bundles and kits to make your job so much easier. And make sure you check out their performance page, where they've got all their performance parts, all listed, available, and in stock today. So make sure you guys check them out at vicauto.com or give them a call and they'll gladly help you out. Now let's get back to the video. So we've got it in with all of our new shims that are installed here, and we made sure our cam is all the way seated, all the way forward. And we've got our feeler gauge at 0.018 and 0.017, middle and bottom of our tolerance. So we can start here on number 3, and this one I think is our tighter one. But as I go to measure it, see if I can do it this way so you guys can see. I make sure it's nice and flat in there. And there's just a slight drag on that. And that's our 0.17, so we can rotate to our next one. It's just going to be number 1. And we're going to start with our ideal. Make sure it's nice and flat. Barely any drag on that, so we know we're right in the money. Move on to the next one. Number 2 here. Again, go with our ideal first. Just a slight drag on that, just like it should be. And finally finish off on number 4. And notice when I'm measuring these, I have the lobe of the camshaft at 180 degrees. So the very bottom of the lobe is actually what's closest to the shim. Yep, and that one has just a touch of drag. So we are all within spec here. And this is going to be the same process we're going to do on the exhaust side. Don't mind this, I know this is on the wrong side. But we're going to do the exact same process on the other side. We're going to take out those buckets. We're going to measure our stock shims and see what numbers we come up with. Alright, so we're back here on our board for our exhaust side. These are our stock measurements for all of our cylinder shims, the stock ones that came with it. We added the caps that are 1.5 millimeters each. Our ideal lash setting for these is going to be 0.018 to 0.020. It's a little bit bigger, just a little bit, for the exhaust side. Now, when we ended up getting them through and measuring them through, we'll show you guys that. The new shims for number 1, we're at 3.5, number 2 is a 3.8, number 3 is a 3.5, and number 4 is a 3.8. And it just goes to show the variance when you're measuring these things out. That ended up being anywhere from a 0.40 on cylinder 2 to a 0.58 on cylinder number 3. So it's a big gap, but there's just machining differences. The caps may be different. The wear on the top of the valves may be a little bit different. The camshaft grind may be a little different. So all those minute measurements are coming into effect when we do this, and that's why it's so important to get yourselves one of these valve shim kits. I'll make sure to put a link in the bottom. They are well worth it, and you can use this for a very long time, and it just saves the hassle of constantly having to measure a set of 8, because as we've learned, they're not the same size. So it's very important that you get a good variety pack like this, because you can test them. Maybe it's a 0.05 difference, and you have to wait on it to come in the mail and all those things. So if you just get the one kit all together, save yourself the hassle. So let's go take a look at how those valves ended up measuring out with their lash. Alright, so it just started raining outside, so I apologize for the noise if there is any. It's raining pretty good. So on our exhaust side, we're trying to go for a 0.019. Our tolerance is 0.018 to 0.020. It's a little bit bigger on our exhaust, but we're going to measure. We've got our feeler gauge right in the middle at 0.019. We're going to go one down at 0.018 just to make sure we are well within spec. So we're going to start on number 3 here, and I think this one's a little tighter. 0.018 fits just fine. 0.019 has just a little drag, maybe a little too much, but the 0.018 fit fine, so we're well within spec on that. So we can take a look at number 4. 0.019. Just a touch of drag, perfect. Take a look at number 2. 0.019, just a little bit of drag on that one. And number 1. 0.019's a tight. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. 0.018. Still too tight. And I can tell it's too tight because I can't see any daylight. So I'm gonna go see how small I can get, and that'll tell me what adjustment on the shim I'm gonna need. So this one's 0.10, and that won't even fit. So that means we need to make a good jump on cylinder number 1 to make that fit. So let's take this off. But as far as we know, all the rest of them are good. We'll just make that adjustment. So we know whatever shim is in here, which is the 3.7 currently, the 0.10 means that it's still not going to fit. So we need to take more than the 0.10 to make the shim with a gap included. So we're going to go down 20, which will put us at a 3.5. We're going to try that one, and that one should work. That 19 feeler gauge is right here. Now we put that 3.5 millimeter shim in there, so this is our replacement one. So this should have enough clearance, and just like that it does. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick rotation of the camshaft all the way around. Make sure that's all the way in. Just like that. Do one full rotation. That way it helps the shim completely seat. Make sure the cap that's on the top of the valve is also seated completely. And we can see there just a little bit of drag. Make sure it's not too big. Yeah, there it is. At the top of our clearance at the 0.20, we feel a little bit of drag, and you can see the line on there where it's a little bit of drag. And when we go to the 0.19, you can hear it scraping just a little bit on there. So that means we are within spec on all 4 of these. So we can torque this down and put our back cam covers on. We've already got our front seals on, and we are real close to being done with this head build. All right, guys, and that's how we measured and made sure our valve clearance. It's raining. Anyway, as it gets louder, all I'm trying to say is this is how we measured our valve shims. It's so important to get that kit. It really makes your job so much easier. The cam towers are torqued to 14 to 16 foot-pounds of torque on these. We're going to make sure these are torqued down now that we've got them all measured and within spec. And make sure when you put your cover bolts on to not do them too tight. You will crack this cover. There's also a little felt washer that goes on there to keep the oil down in the cam tower and not over the top. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. And until next time, and hopefully it's not raining so bad, we'll see you.